What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick.
I'm Jammin John.
And we have an album review for you, and one that I have been anticipating because in terms of like newer melodic death metal acts that have popped up here recently, this band is quickly becoming one of my favorites. We are going to go over the latest offering from Wolfheart, Draconian Darkness. This also comes out on the 6th of September on Raining Phoenix Music, which we just brought up in the last one.
Seems to be a theme.
This band formed in 2013 in Finland. This is their 7th full-length overall. I became a fan of this band with their album Wolves of Karelia, which I found out I don't own. And I need to correct that because it was an awesome album. We actually reviewed their last EP, Skull Soldiers. It was with Tread, not you, don't worry.
Right, yeah. You'll find out why.
And this awesome melodic death metal act started off as a one-man project from one Tuomas Sakonen. Maybe I got that right, maybe I didn't. Either way, he started this project and pretty much ended up quitting like all the other bands he was in, which were a lot. He has since returned to at least 2 of the projects that I know of because I've been over him recently, Dawn of Solace and Before the Dawn. He's got a thing for Dawn. But yeah, I've been listening to this band for a while. On the other hand,
I became a fan of this band today. Never heard of them before. In fact, Wolfheart kind of triggers something in me. Just has to do with some passwords that I changed a while ago for
email addresses.
Yeah, email addresses and such, just for a friend of the family, we'll put it that way. And Wolfheart I was like, I can't do it. But yeah, I listened to it today, and yeah, I've been missing out. Who knew? Except everybody that is a fan of this band.
Yeah, no, those people definitely know.
Yep, they know.
One of the things that I love about this band is I think it dismisses a lot of the notions that melodic death metal doesn't come across as heavy. Like, oh, it's generally more about the catchy riffs and yeah, like they growl and there's usually sing-songy choruses. But this band is flat out heavy. And this band is all about the riffs. Now, I would say that they kind of border on like symphonic metal to a degree. Like there's a lot of synths on here, but this album and actually all of their stuff is more about just clever, heavy riff structure that balances out flat out brutality and just clever hooks across the board.
Yeah, I've never been a big supporter of synths in general in either death metal or melodic death metal or whatever you have, because usually I find that most synth work comes across as rather cheesy. And for the most part, the synths in this record are fairly like theatric and big and gothic, and like there are a couple of moments that I would call cheese, so to say. I don't think that's escapable when you're using synths. I think really, unless you're like a dissonant death metal band where your goal is to be creepy, I don't think you're going to nail synths all the time, but for the most part in here, they're pretty good.
A lot of the synths work in here because it kind of accentuates what they're already doing, whether it's a more sinister spot where they get some more like kind of gothic sounding synths in the background, or just coming out of the gate epic with the opening track, Ancient Cold. The symphonic lead-in honestly sets up the song really well because it kind of sounds like orcs marching on Gondor. And it transitions well into the main riff. The main riff complements the symphonic elements, and then the riff just kind of takes over. And where the synths sit in the mix is a little bit further back, so they're not intrusive to the point where, like, God, shut the Philharmonic fuck up. That kind of drives me nuts at a certain point. But they complement the music really well, and everything on here is driven by like a level of intensity. Like nothing on here I would say is searching for a giant pop hook or anything like that. Like this isn't like, In Flames in their transitional period where they decided to ruin music. These guys keep a level of heaviness throughout the album while adding melodies and hooks. So, on the same token, when you're hearing like a big, beefy, chuggy riff, you're like, yeah, that's just gnarly.
Yeah.
But you're also like, man, that's just got like a really solid hook to it. And then melodies come in on top of it. I was like, you know what? That is pretty awesome.
And there are a lot of catchy moments on here, and it's not necessarily done with solely melodic riffs. Like sometimes it's done with very syncopated, chuggy, just low-end riffs too. It's like the presentation of them, very percussive riffs.
Yeah.
I think. A good example of that would be both the songs Even Fall and then the really syncopated song Throne of Bones, which I'm going to be honest, reminds me a lot of Meshuggah's Bleed.
Yeah, there's like a fun little hitch in that kind of like galloping chug in there. And it's just like this clever syncopated drum beat too. Like you get these little kick flutters every now and then. And it's kind of hard not to think of Bleed. But the songs are both heavy, they're intense, they're fast. but they also have, again, these like giant hooks, and they don't frequently do it with a lot of clean vocals. In fact, clean vocals are used really sparingly on here. A lot of this is driven by Thomas's just big, beefy roar.
Yeah. Very powerful vocals. That guy has some pipes for sure.
And when the clean vocals do show up, they're often blended with harsh vocals too, so you get like this kind of gravelly backbone to this otherwise very soaring chorus. And in terms of like variety and dynamics, in terms of the songwriting, man, this album kind of goes all over the place, but does it really well. Like, you have songs in here that are outright savage and brutal as hell. I wouldn't say shocking because I've been listening to them for a while, but I mean, to a casual listener, it's like, oh, it's melodic death metal, so this probably won't get like too heavy. Songs like Grave in particular. That song, while it does set up the whole atmosphere of it with a isolated piano with some like atmospheric synths in the background, it sounds like it's being played in a haunted house. It just kicks down the door with the turnover, and then you're into blasts and one of the catchiest, darkest tremolos on the entire album.
Yep. And a big groovy breakdown too, and I didn't expect to hear a lot of that in this record with the way it's presented. Because with the way these songs flow, I wouldn't necessarily state that it alludes to breakdown moments. Like, it just seems to be continuations of riffs and building layers on top of things and such. Also, Trial by Fire, big nasty breakdown on it. More akin to like bolt thrower grooves.
Honestly, like, the riffs on that one, I would say, kind of like leave the melodeath arena for the most part. Like, yeah, there's a bit of melody to it, but they feel like more traditional, like just straight up old school death metal harmonies on there. It's, you know, more sinister and just kind of like brutal sounding versus having like, you know, a nice little melodic anchor to it. Scion of the Flame 2 captures a level of, again, like kind of gothic darkness to it. Kicks in with like heavy tremolo harmonies, like a double time groove. It's stomping in. It sounds evil as shit. The symphonic elements kind of add like a layer of like ghostly wails in the background. It sounds flat out evil. And honestly, it kind of reminded me of when I got into Dimmu Borgir, even though I would say that this is Dimmu better. But this song might be packed with some of the coolest dynamics on the entire album. There's a section where it drops out to clean vocals and acoustic guitars, which this album does that really well. Lots of these isolated, intimate moments, and then building into just giant, larger than life-size riffs and melodies. And that acoustic section builds into this giant soaring section of just lush melodies. But there's something clever that it does when it comes in with like the next verse. It's something as simple as like a key change, but it goes from like melodic death metal to flat out like morbid angel worship on it.
The Gale kind of does the same thing, comes in with acoustic guitar and a little bit of piano. It's very somber. It's got a real big build to it though, and that intro takes its dear old sweet time to finally get to something heavier. Yeah, so after this gloomy acoustic moment, that just immediately, even without a turnover, it's just kind of like a stop on the dime, like they hit the last note and then bam, blast beat and off to the races.
It's a giant soaring melody. Honestly, I would say it's the prettiest song on the album, and it has like some of the heaviest moments too, but it's that like ascending tremolo where it's very like atmospheric. Like, I don't want to say Death Heaven because I don't want to say Death Heaven, but something like more like atmospheric black metal mixed with like melodeath in there. And I like that it sinks back down into that intimate moment of acoustic guitars and clean vocals, and then gets flat out just heavy again.
And really, I think a lot of that comes from the individual musicianship going on here too. First of all, the drummer. This guy is tight and dialed in and does his part to bring heft to these songs. Like, just when you think the song isn't going to get any heavier, this guy breaks it down to a halftime groove, and his double kick is always spot on. Actually, he reminds me a lot of when Dan Presland was in Ne Obliviscaris. Like, he just plays a lot like that guy. There's a bunch of really cool tribal drum movements going on, like an even fall. It's got this part where it breaks into a cleaner melody, and he's just doing this wacky tribal stuff. He does it a couple more times throughout the record.
And the drums, for me, are the thing that keeps this really intense. Like, even in their more melodic and hooky moments, he's doing, like, more aggressive drums to make it, you know, sound, like, decidedly more metal. Like, there's nothing on here that I would say kind of, like, crosses into, like, a more accessible style of melodeath. Like, this is very straightforward, like kind of traditional melodeath with just like a lot of extra seasonings, I'd say.
And the guitar work too. Now, first of all, while this album is very riffy, I can't knock it on riffs whatsoever. There are absolutely killer riffs in 90% of the songs on this album. The lead work is done really well too. Very tasteful leads, a lot of neoclassical flourishes. Death Leads the Way has a very tasteful yet flashy solo. Throne of Bones kind of has the same thing going on, although that's a really, really shreddy lead. A lot of Marty Friedman nods, it feels like, especially in the first couple songs.
Yeah, I got that too, but I also, again, got a lot of variety on here. Like the leads, again, like you said, complimented the songs, but they weren't always like, like this one's a super shreddy technical one.
Yeah.
Very melodic. Like there's a lot of like different ones on here where they sound a little bit more sinister, or sometimes it's just like more of a lead melody with like a nice little flashy end to it. So at no point would I say it's like showboaty at all. Like everything on here serves the song, and like even their traipses into like, Finnish melodic death metal always has like just a hint of power metal to it. It kind of makes it like a little bit brighter and a little bit more fun, or at least like the melodies kind of jump out a bit more. So nothing really comes across as cheesy. Even the more like folky touches that show up on Burning Sky, they absolutely work. They're very grounded. They sound, again, a lot like what you'd expect from Finnish death metal. There's always a touch of folk to that too. And they build well into the next transition, which is like heavy tremolos again. So it kind of gets right back to being just flat out heavy melodeath, and then goes back to flirting with different melodies. And I have to say, I really dig the production on here. Like this has that good balance of sounding polished, just so everything kind of has its own space to work and everything is crystal clear, but there's an organic sound to it. Yeah. It still sounds like a real band, and it isn't too overpopulated with synths. Now they are used a lot, but again, being pushed more into the background and letting the riffs do the bulk of the work. I think that's exactly how like 90% of the more symphonic metal bands and melodeath bands should probably do it, but that's just me. I know there's people that love that shit.
Yeah, I like it when synths are used more as an atmosphere and more as a seasoning than they are as a lead instrument. They're definitely not overpowering the riffs. The guitars have a great crunch to them. They're a little bit warm. They're pretty beefy when they want to be. The drums actually sound really natural, and I'm very impressed by that. Because normally in music, when there's a lot going on or a lot of layering going on, the drums can tend to be a little bit compressed. And in this case, they just sound very punchy. That kick has a nice deep thud to it. The snare hits well. The cymbals aren't overdone. It's got a real natural vibe to it, again, while sounding polished enough to let everything breathe.
There's a lot of stuff on here that I'd say is kind of comparable to Dark Tranquility, just because it's a melodeath band that uses synths a lot. But it's different. It feels a little bit more like, again, like kind of like a symphonic touch. And they have like a different way of like achieving sort of a gothic sort of sound. Yeah. As far as like any negatives on here, honestly, they are very few. Like the only song on here that maybe didn't hit as hard for me was Death Leads the Way. It's a good mid-tempo, like kind of anthemic stomper. Giant size opening riff. It's, catchy, but I kind of feel like it's the least creative of all the songs, because a lot of these songs just kind of take you all over the place. Like this is definitely an adventure of an album. But this one, it kind of felt like maybe a better version of a song that Amon Amarth has written 14 to 15 times and titled about a Viking or drinking mead, or a dragon and a Viking drinking mead together. There's some moments in the song that kind of step outside of that to give it a little bit more character, but if that's my biggest complaint, it's really not much of a complaint at all, because I still enjoyed that song.
Yeah, I don't actually really have any complaints. Even Nick's complaint, I don't really necessarily agree with. I enjoyed that song quite a bit. That stompy groove that's going on for the verses is pretty killer, and the lead in that song rules. Yeah. So yeah, I really don't have any gripes other than the fact that I should have been listening to this band sooner than now. I don't always give Melodeath a chance, and mostly it's because it comes off as a little cheesy when they work in synths there, and sometimes the symphonic elements don't land. But that's not the case of this band. I really enjoyed this. So overall, I'm going to give this a solid 4. It could go up from there. I need to spend a little bit more time with this record, which I'm probably going to do, because a lot of these songs really hit pretty hard. There's tight musicianship going on here, killer dynamics. Again, the ebb and flow between the clean, somber moments and getting all gothic-y to just being straight death metal heavy is fucking amazing. There's killer drum work, stellar transitions from moment to moment. Like, I kind of couldn't wait to see what came around the next corner. The lead work is great. Again, I think there's just great musicianship going on here and excellent songwriting. So I don't really have anything to knock it on other than the fact that I need to spend a little more time with it just to really kind of hone in on what I'm trying to say about this band. If you're a fan of bands like In Mourning, At the Gates, Ne Obliviscaris in parts, you'll hear it. It's in the drum work. Blood Red Throne, Early Arch Enemy, and probably a few things that I'm not even thinking of that he's going to say. I definitely recommend checking this out. It's a pretty solid listen.
Yeah, I'm at a 4 as well. This is yet another killer album from Wolfheart, and this is kind of like a day in the office for these guys because I've listened to most of their stuff. I still need to own more of it. But yeah, this band really doesn't miss, and they do like MELODEATH some justice in terms of like making it nice and heavy as well as being tuneful. Like I do feel that some MELODEATH kind of goes after the hook a little bit too much and it comes across as cheesy and it loses that death metal edge. This band has plenty of death metal edge. And there's still loads of melody and synths and big hooky choruses and soaring leads. They found this like perfect balance on here. These songs are flat out catchier than hell. The dynamics on here are absolutely fantastic. I love how it can go from very quiet and intimate acoustic guitars and melodies to building to these absolutely grand heights. The Gale, the closer, prettiest song on the album, and it's just flat out huge. But yeah, this is just a nice all-encompassing MELODEATH listen for me. It does everything that I want MELODEATH to do, and it does some things that I want MELODEATH to do a lot more. Like, give me more just like flat out heavy moments that remind me that it is very much death metal. This band does that so damn well. Yeah, pretty much if you're a fan of Insomnium for sure, albeit like not as depressing, like more anthemic I would say. Calma, Cataclysm, Dark Tranquility, stuff like that. Definitely check out this album and then just go back and check out the rest of their stuff if you haven't checked out the rest of their stuff like that guy.
Which I'm going to do.
He's going to do
Yep,
that.
I'm going to do that.
So if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below, thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel up in the banner in the bottom right-hand corner. But if you're looking for Thralls Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have t-shirts, both old and new. The old ones are discounted, provided we have your size. And we even have hats, too. So if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below.
Tons of stuff going on at Thralls of Metal pretty much all the time. Album reviews, discography rankings, discussion forums. Is it metal? Is it not metal? States of metal. Collection updates, live streams, which have been a pretty big thing lately. We appreciate you guys being a part of that. That's awesome to see 100 people up at 2 in the morning. That kind of baffles me too. But anyway, all this stuff we do for you guys. We appreciate you all. Thank you for being a part of Thralls of Metal. We appreciate it.
Yeah, you guys absolutely roll. Tons of content coming your way. I'm going to eventually get done with all these collection updates and then get back to some other segments, but I'm really trying to catch up on all the shit I bought. Thrall's problems, or my problems. Either way, Thrall's problems. But yeah, no, you guys absolutely roll. Thank you so much, and we will catch you later.